Welcome. I'm Heather McCutcheon, and I'm so delighted to be here with beloved former co host and speaker of this very summit, Andrea Kennedy. Andrea began her relationship with Reiki in 1995 and later founded her business, Mainstream Reiki, to promote Reiki to people like her, everyday people with mainstream backgrounds. She came to Reiki with a degree in physics and a high level of skepticism early on, but trusting Reiki has allowed her to reach thousands of people around the world so they might explore Reiki for themselves. Andrea teaches live and online Reiki classes, creates videos for her Mainstream Reiki YouTube channel, hosts the popular podcast Beyond the Reiki Gateway, offers mentoring sessions, and her latest global project is the new Mainstream Reiki community, which is dedicated to empowering Reiki practitioners to succeed both personally and professionally. We are fortunate to have Andrea here today to talk to us about evolving and thriving, embracing the shift to live and online Reiki teaching. Welcome back to the summit, Andrea.
Oh, thank you, Heather. It's wonderful to be here with you, and I'm excited about the topic. And wow, just can't wait to get into it with you.
Yeah, it's such a hot topic right now, and I can't wait to hear what you have to share with us. Let's just start out. Obviously, back in 1922, at Reiki's beginnings, Reiki was taught and passed on exclusively in person. And then the internet made it possible for people to teach classes online, and many people did, others did not. And then later we had the pandemic. And during that time, there was such a big push to have classes and all kinds of content available online virtually, including Reiki classes. So, what are your thoughts about that evolution and how this has gone?
Well, I started teaching back in 2006, I believe. And of course, back then it was in person. I never thought, I mean, the whole internet was different back then. I mean, if we think about it. But what I would say is I was skeptical about online things or digital type offerings for Reiki training early on because I just wasn't sure how that would be. It wasn't a question of effectiveness. It was a question of, how well equipped is the student after that class? Could it be a complete class? Could the student take that class and then utilize it and practice the methods and that kind of thing that were introduced in that type of class. So it wasn't about Reiki and if it could work online or work digitally necessarily, but it was like, how is that for the student afterwards? I think that was my main thing. And, it's funny because I do remember early on, I'm teaching in person and that's going all right. And then I saw offered, I think it was DVDs, and you could take a class on a DVD. And I thought, but how do they do the attunement and how does that work? And there's no practice or anything like that. So I pretty much thought, yeah, I'm not doing that. And then funny thing was during the pandemic, it became available. I teach Holy Fire Reiki, and it became available to teach online. And I thought, wow, I don't know about this. So I went through my own process about that. And one of the things that I did was I went online and I really did start to delve in because I wanted to make up my mind based on, my reasons and if I thought I could offer a valuable course. And so I had a pretty high bar. I went on YouTube as just searching around and I found there was this channel and it said that you could learn Reiki for free. So it was like this hour and a half video, I think, and it's Learn Reiki. So I experimented and I went and I did it well. A few clicks, $29 later, it didn't end up being free, and 8 minutes after I paid my $29, I was emailed 3 Reiki certificates. I was a Reiki master,
Oh, wow.
$29, a few
Okay.
clicks. Yeah. And I didn't even sign up for the attunements. You could sign up for attunements, right?
But
Well,
that was optional.
apparently, because I got my certificates, right? And so
Okay.
that really highlighted for me a couple of things. Not all online classes are the same. And something else I think is important to remember is I think we judge online things versus in-person things. And that's the thing that we measure. And we tend, some people, I think, generalize and say, in person only, that's the quality. Online, no, not quality. And what if I can get anything across in this time together with you, it's to really get us to acknowledge that there are some pretty not great classes offered in person, just as there are some not great quality online or digital classes. And, you know, it isn't about the platform or the delivery, it's about the integrity of the teacher and the outcome for the student. That's what I would say about that. I just think that the quality comes down to that, the quality of the training, um, integrity of the teacher, and what the student is, what are they gaining? What is the real value there?
That's so well said. You said early on, after you took the $29 class, you said it told me there's a wide range of classes available online. And I almost interrupted and said, there's a really wide range of classes available in person. There's no guarantee just because the class is in person that it has a high level of content, or as you said, the integrity of the instructor, the experience of the instructor, and the takeaways for the student. Yeah, that's really well said. And it is up to everyone to research who they're going to be taking a class from and see not only their level of experience, reviews that they've been given, et cetera, if that person resonates with you, and not just here's a cheap class or this is on a day that I can take it.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So you mentioned the pandemic and it's, you know, a lot happened there. Do you feel, because I know this is a little bit controversial, do you think teaching classes online is respectful to Reiki?
Yeah, that is a really great question because, you know, I've been around Reiki for a while and I'm always a bit disappointed when I see, read or hear people judging other people in the Reiki community. And I just feel like, really, I mean, that just doesn't feel very Reiki-ish to me, quite frankly. But what I would say about that is, you know, we know through research that there were other styles of Reiki being practiced before Usui. So I want to just dial things back and say, you know what? To me, Reiki is an energy. First and foremost, it's an energy. And to me, it means spiritually guided life force energy. Whether it's Usui Reiki or Holy Fire Reiki or Angel Reiki, or whatever kind of style it is, at the heart is spiritually guided life force energy. And so even when Usui went to the mountain and received Reiki, what happened there? He received an energy. Everything else that came after that energy is made up. Yeah, I just said that, but it's true, right? Because the Japanese Reiki techniques were developed. The classes, the attunements, the symbols, all of that was decided upon by people. And then a certain tradition was adopted by enough people that decided upon, agreed upon tradition was what carried forward, all decided on by people. Now, Hayashi taught Reiki 1 and 2 together over 5 days. There was no 21-day period between 1 and 2. Some people in the community say it must be that you do level 1 and then the 21 days. And if you don't do that, then you're not adhering to the tradition. But I would say, but if we look at the history, Reiki has evolved and changed over time. And so what I would say is, who defines the tradition then? Who gets to say that this tradition that started somewhere along the path from 1922, to now, who gets to decide what the tradition is? And so I don't know. I mean, to me, I look at where we are today, and I look at nature. If we look at nature, all things in nature change. There is nothing natural that remains unchanged. Nothing. And so why would Reiki need to remain unchanged? Why would Reiki not evolve? Our world is so different than it was over 100 years ago. And I want to meet people where they are now. We haven't even talked about the change on Earth and in the vibration and how awakened people are today versus over 100 years ago. And I see my role as meeting people where they are today and making Reiki more accessible for people. And to me, that seems natural, and that seems as though evolving is part of this equation. Reiki changed from Usui to Hayashi to Mrs. Takata. Reiki changed. And again, I would say, who gets to decide what the correct tradition is? And the more we hold on to things, I don't know, that doesn't seem natural to me. That's just my opinion. And I will say, if people feel drawn to the tradition and they want to teach in that way, beautiful. Please do that. Do what resonates with you. I'm not saying everybody needs to teach online, just as I would invite other practitioners not to say that no one should teach other than in person. I think acceptance in the community is a much more congruous, or what would I say? It's a congruent way to be with Reiki. It's in alignment. If we will accept each other and go with the flow of allowing different styles, different lineages, different teachers within a style and a lineage to follow their guidance as revered and respected Reiki master teachers through all of these decades have done. Following the guidance, doing as they were guided to do. And there are examples all the way through the history of Reiki for that. But I think that there are so many people that need Reiki. Why should it be limited into how we can help them literally put this in their hands to help themselves and their families?
Again, so well said. And you covered so much there with jotting down notes, and you were just ticking off all the things that I wrote down. Back to up on the mountain, no one was there attuning Mikao Usui. He wasn't learning in person, he was getting the energy. And so, we're talking about where you have to teach it in person, it only works from person to person. Well, it didn't in that instance. He channeled that. He received guidance. He received that. And as you said, even in the first three people in the lineage, they changed it a little bit based on their guidance. And so on down the line, as you said, why is one shift more legitimate than any other? People are feeling guided in unique personal ways, how to use it and how to pass it along. So I just loved everything that you said about that. And of course, that our circumstances have evolved and that the pandemic was such a big part of that. Just like you, I was a little bit put off by online teaching. It seemed like cheating. And by the same token, I had people in other parts of the country who had read my book and wanted to take my class. They want to fly across the country and stay in a hotel in Chicago to take my class. And I was like, that's ridiculous. Take a class wherever you live. You'll find a good person nearby. It's too much hassle to do that. So like you, during the pandemic, started teaching online, and now these people can take my class, and it's been such a blessing. And we've evolved to the point where people can wrap their brains around it. They can be attentive. They can feel like they're attending class. It's all great. Um, yeah, thank you so much for that. Also, I had a question earlier on. You said that through Holy Fire, teaching online became available, and I wanted you to expand on that. What do you mean by that? Because not everyone would be familiar with Holy Fire and what that means exactly.
Well, Holy Fire, I was teaching that in person and practicing in person. It's just a different style of Reiki, and the attunement method is different. We call them placements and things like that. So it's just a different style. It's actually Usui slash Holy Fire Reiki. And that was developed by William Rand. And so in my world, that's what I knew. That style and lineage was I didn't start with that back in 2006, but that's where I was at the time of the pandemic. And in that style, there was guidance, there was new teaching about how can we take this online. And one of the things I tell my students, and I just feel guided to share it here, is another thing that I hear in the Reiki community, and please chime in, Heather, and that is that there's only one Reiki, and stop with all the different styles and lineages and things like that. And so there's this judgment about that. And what I would say is, different styles have different methods and techniques, for one thing, but also in terms of the energy. If someone has learned different styles, I'd love to hear their input, because for myself and for others, it feels different. The energy does feel different. And also, we have symbols. And if you will tune into just one of those symbols, that energy of that symbol is different than the next symbol. Or why would we have different symbols? So anyway, I'm just putting that out there, because one of the things I tell my students is, as sort of an answer to that, Reiki doesn't change. There's only one Reiki. Imagine having someone come in for a Reiki session and they lay down and they're ready to receive, and we're channeling that energy. Is it not true that the energy that comes through shifts to offer whatever that person needs for their highest good at that time? Wouldn't we say that? The energy meets them. It's spiritually guided, and so it offers that person what they need at that time. And then what I would do is I would invite us to shift that scene, and let's put humanity on the Reiki table, the collective consciousness. And so if humanity is there on the planet, and we're collectively saying, help, help, what do? We need help. Whether it's the war in Ukraine or whether it's the pandemic, let's use the pandemic. We need help. The world needs Reiki. How can we still teach Reiki? How can we still bring more Reiki into the world at this time when we need it so much? In my illustration here, humanity has, so many of us had a collective voice in that. Help us, help us. How can we heal? How can we help ourselves? To me, the energy offers us the answer. When we ask, when we implore, when we have an energetic intention that is put out with energy, the universe answers. That's how I see that. And so when the pandemic happened, many of us were, just as I described, how do we do this? How do we move on? How do we help ourselves? And then we in Holy Fire Reiki, we received new teaching. How can we do this online? Here are some techniques. Here, the energy will work. And so more was added to the system in order to answer the call that so many people had.
Hmm.
And then fast forward to the war in Ukraine. I think so many people around the world were like, what on what? Or what? We're still doing this on the planet? Unlike
Yeah.
anything ever before. And then this energy of world peace and the support for more peace on the planet came through. And is Reiki changing? I don't think so. Reiki is Reiki is a band of frequencies. But as humans, I think that we are becoming better able to access and be more aware of more. We are changing. It isn't the energy, but we are opening up to more of what Reiki has been all along. And what I mean by Reiki, again, is spiritually guided life force energy, not bound to any style or lineage or anything, no tradition. The energy itself, I think that's actually what's changing. It's us being able to access and utilize and channel more of what it is.
Yeah, we're awakening to what's available in Reiki and we're leveling up more to that. Yeah,
Yeah.
well
Hmm.
put again. Yeah. And when we talk about people individually using Reiki in their own way and with different people practicing in different way, it's not to, criticize and judge in this way, but look around at all of the choices and see what resonates with you. And there's something for everyone. So if
Yes.
someone is like this particular way doesn't quite work for me, but then three people down the line, this is very appealing to me and speaks to me and calls to me, and I feel very motivated by this. That's fantastic. Thank gosh, there's choices here.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And I would just invite people to take what works for them and move on. There's no need to belittle or put down any other style of Reiki, any other lineage. Let's remember that we're Reiki people.
Yeah. Although you and I were both, just to be fair, a little taken aback. I was a little taken aback, and it sounded like you were a little taken aback by that 8 minutes in, you had your master teacher certificate. Both of us
Well,
were like, oh,
it's true.
oh
Well, yeah, that's
gosh.
true, right? But here's the thing. Um, here's the thing. In any area of life, there are people who want to help and support and bring more light in. And then there are people who, aren't really interested in that so much, and they're more out for themselves. And so that's unfortunately in any area that we could look at in life. And so Reiki's no different there. But what I mean by that is what I just said is we have I want to say it isn't mainstream, but in the more recognized communities of Reiki. So what I mean is not the YouTube video that I saw or whatever. I think that's kind of in its own category, quite frankly. But we talk about integrity, and there are very good classes out there in other styles and other lineages, very good teachers across the board who are very gifted in what they do. They have integrity and all of that. And so I just was bringing up the fact that in these larger, more accepted Reiki communities, I find it unfortunate, this judgment
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Hmm.
Um, I just don't think that there's any cause for that. That judgment is against different styles, different lineages, and the different ways that we teach. The YouTube example, I just don't think that falls actually into the category of teaching Reiki. That's just really a money-making type of endeavor to me.
Thank you for delineating that. So just a reminder that discernment is important, no matter where you go and what you're doing, and
Yeah.
all matters Reiki as well. Yeah. So you had mentioned earlier and repeated and emphasized for us the importance of the integrity of the instructor, but another area that you emphasized was that the students have valuable takeaways, employable, practice and takeaways. So what do you say about those? What would you say to people who question the effectiveness of online teaching? Does it work for people? What has been feedback that you've gotten?
Yeah, so I know I can speak firsthand about my classes because how what we do in there. So again, not all online classes are the same. There's a difference between just a webinar style where it's self-paced and the students in front of their computer, they never talk to a teacher, they never see another student. To me, there is I think a place for that. And what I mean by that is I've had people come to my class and they'll say, "Yeah, I just took a little $20 class on one of those platforms and it was just a self-paced, as I described, no teacher, nothing, no interaction whatsoever. They read some slides, kind of thing on their computer." But they say, what I find really interesting is they'll say, "Yeah, I was interested in Reiki, so I did that. But then I found out I had a lot of questions and it left a lot of stuff out. And I didn't know what to do after the class. So then I decided to come and take your class so I could build and really explore and have a better education." So you see, it's interesting, isn't it? Because some of these classes that I would personally not go take can serve a really wonderful purpose for people. And that's giving them an introduction.
An
And
entry point.
yeah,
Yeah.
an entry point that meets them where they are. And then they're following their guidance to perhaps and saying, there's something there, but I need to take a different class. And
Yeah.
yay for them. I think
Yeah.
that's wonderful. So these classes aren't all bad. They do
Yeah.
they do offer something out there. Um, my um, my hope is that people would continue to learn until they feel confident and until they have a grasp on the different techniques and also practice and take their time with it, to develop as a practitioner. But online classes taught live, now that's where I am. I teach live and online. So I don't have people just watch recordings and then they get a certificate. Although maybe there are classes out there that are good to do that. Again, I just kind of do what resonates with me. The classes live and online, I don't think leave anything out. The only thing that my students don't get is touching their partner as far as practicing goes. There's no physical touch. Everything else we do, we do together. And so they'll practice together, either in pairs or in small groups. We have discussion, we have questions, we get into some really fascinating topics. Sometimes we'll kind of veer off and we have wonderful discussions. And I think that that is remarkable. And so there is a bit of, we're not in person, but there's some advantages there too that I think are often overlooked. But I think, again, like we said before, there are quality in person, there are quality online, and then there's the opposite too. So I think you said it, you use discernment. But as far as live and online classes, the way I teach them, I don't think that the students lack one thing.
Yeah. That's been my experience as well. And they're so grateful. I just had a woman in level two. She said after level one, she said again after level two, thank you so much for making this option available to me. She lives in small town somewhere. There's not a class. She can't get to a class and
Yes.
is so thrilled to be raptly attentive, engaging, asking questions, with the other students who are live in front of me because I offer integrated classes. So there's both. There's people zoomed in and there's people sitting in front of me. And I work really hard to make sure I turn the camera around. So when someone in the live class is talking, everyone can see them. So you're not just looking at me the whole time, you're part of the class. But they're so grateful for that. And I guess, like I said, just like you, I was reluctant to offer that. But when the pandemic came and everyone had time and was so stressed out and so in need. You could tell, you could feel there's a need for this. It almost is like the universe was nudging us. You need to branch out with this because
Yeah.
really there are places where there's a lot of Reiki available. I'm in a big city. There's a lot of people here teaching Reiki, but people don't all have access to it. And now remotely, almost everybody has access to it. So it may be a positive, silver lining of the pandemic. We've been nudged to become, you know, more unified in that way, have greater reach so that more people have access to it than did before. And that's fantastic.
Well, right. And that I totally agree, Heather. And the other thing too is, speaking about the effectiveness, distance Reiki works. So
Exactly.
why would this not work?
Right. Right.
That's been the mystery for me. If you believe that distance Reiki is fully effective, why would a distant attunement not be effective?
Right. If Reiki can work through time and space, why would Zoom be a hindrance to that?
Right.
And you mentioned earlier that where you're at is with the live, Zoom. Someone's there, you're interacting with them in real time.
Hmm.
And I'm on board with that. And then I was super reluctant. One of my Reiki Brigade volunteers took one of the classes that you talked about. I think she paid $25 and it was a self-paced class and she listened to pre-recorded things. And she'd been volunteering with me for like a year before I found this out. People love her. People have incredible experiences with her. And so when she told me that, I was taken aback. How did she get where she is if that's how she learned? But she said there were quizzes, there was no cheating. You had to go through all of the material, and the attunement was live in person. So they would call
Nice.
and schedule that. And I was like, okay. I guess the more I teach Reiki, the more I find I'm repeating myself, and maybe to have these chunks recorded would be okay. I like to think I use examples that resonate with people that are sitting in front of me as I channel as you do. Here's the right information presented in the right way for these people. If it's pre-recorded, you don't quite have that option, but you also can record a ton of information and they can access it as needed. And I guess one of the scenarios, and you said, I'm sure there's a time and a place for that. I'm thinking specifically of first responders. They want them to take Reiki classes. I want them to take Reiki classes. They want to take Reiki classes, but their schedule is such that we're not going to get 8 people together in a room at the same time for a large chunk of time. So if they could self-pace and then show up in a group environment for the attunement and for subsequent Reiki shares, here's the times these are available, comes to whatever ones you want, that might be a system that works for them. And I guess as I said earlier, some people are in remote places, they don't have access to Reiki. I don't want it to be a situation where your circumstances make it so that you can't have this. Why aren't we falling all over ourselves to make it available to everybody, regardless of their circumstances? Again, with integrity and quality and with an eye towards what they are getting as an outcome. But given that, what difference does it make? First responders want it. I want them to have it. Figure it out. We have so many ways to work with technology to make this happen.
We do. We do. And I really think that that is a viable option. What you said and it's so funny because you mentioned about channeling what's right for this group. That's one of the reasons that I have not recorded any of my classes. Well, the students receive the recordings from their own class, so they can
Yes.
view it, which is another great thing of online teaching. But that's one reason that I haven't made, recorded material yet, because I'm having a hard time letting go of that
Yeah.
because a class is unique. And I also feel that the people who show up for that class, that is the class for them. That mix of people. And I've had students that meet in my classes and years later, they still meet together and share Reiki. They do their own little Reiki shares and things like that. So connections that these students can make with each other are real. They're real connections.
Yeah, and the ease with which people online can connect with each other. If they've come to a class in person and they've driven and they've parked and there's traffic and they live over there and they live over there, and in their head they're thinking there's driving and there's parking and there's distance and there's time involved in connecting with these people, versus if they've met online, they already have precedent. They have muscle memory of that. I can
Yeah,
just pop online and here I am with my Reiki friends.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. That's one of the benefits that online teaching absolutely offers. Are there any others you can think of?
Yeah, so I would say being in your own home is such a plus because the food that you like is in your fridge, your own bathroom. There's not a line to your bathroom, You mentioned about the driving and the travel and all of that. There's none of that. And, let's think about this too, because if a person is even driving to class or something like that, their energy is different because maybe they had to change their morning routine in order to make it there on time. Um, and maybe they're not as grounded. Maybe they're feeling less balanced. Maybe somebody cut them off on the road over there. And so then they're upset over that. When somebody's just in their own home, they can stick to their spiritual practices, their routine. They have the same food. Everything is just a baseline for them, which I think helps them show up for the class and everything that's offered there with more presence, with more calm, and just in a more grounded place. So I see that as a huge bonus. And also, I've had students also tell me that they don't want to do in-person classes because their personality, like they might have high anxiety and they might really be wanting to learn this for themselves, and they want to not be around people for whatever reason, whatever they're going through. And so they really appreciate having this alternative for themselves, that they can be more at ease in
Mhm.
that situation.
Yeah, I mean, just even an introverted personality maybe doesn't,
Mhm.
maybe it's a big effort and expenditure of energy to come and interact with a room full of people and they feel safer and more comfortable and more grounded in their own space, as you said. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a
Hmm.
lot of reasons. And, who knows, maybe requiring people to show up live in person has ruled these people out for a long time. And now they're attending Reiki classes for the first time, and we're thrilled to have them all join us. So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
great.
Well, what you just said there, Heather, too, brings this up to me because if it had to be in person and it had to be extended, I mean, I teach in a couple of days, and that's another thing that is frowned upon by some people. But it works.
What do you mean? What teaching in a couple days is frowned upon?
Yeah, instead, you do a weekend class and they get the certificate. And so
Yeah.
there's some judgment around that it should be, repeated meetings with the teacher or whatever it is. I don't know what all of that is, but have you not heard that?
I've
That,
not heard so much of that.
oh, interesting.
I've heard like hours. People have said it needs to be at least this many hours, which I always
Yeah,
thought was a little bit arbitrary. I mean, we want substantial class, but
right. Yeah. Well,
yeah,
again, I think it comes down to quality. I mean, you could
yeah,
sit there for 10 hours and still have a pretty rotten class.
yeah.
So
It could be
again,
pretty airy.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's all arbitrary at some
right,
point,
right.
it's all arbitrary. But yeah, so there is some judgment about, oh, after 2 days they're Reiki too, and that's way too, that isn't right or whatever. And what I would say about that is, um, if the students can utilize the techniques and practice with the energy after class, then that's not nothing. The other thing too about having a class that is multiple days in a row is the energy of the group is maintained. And if you drag it out, week after week after week, people are busy. People, they have life in between. And so every time you come back and you want to get back into that class energy, it's not so easy. But when you do it in an intense type class, oh, the energy really builds in the class and can be uh, it can intensify in the class, but there's a safe, I don't know, container or something. I'm
Mhm.
kind of grasping for that word, but yeah.
A
So
really immersive experience, an
yeah,
intense
it's
immersive experience that
yeah,
you're sharing
yeah. And
for
so
a finite amount of time. Yeah.
yeah, and so again, there's variation, and isn't that okay? Because some if a person doesn't want to take the class like that, they don't have to.
Right.
Everybody gets a choice. But I think again, if we boil everything down, what is Reiki? Spiritually guided life force energy. It is an energy. And then we look at people. All people have life force energy. So shouldn't all people be able to learn this and utilize this? And shouldn't it just be easy for them to be able to do that? To me, it really just boils down to that. Um, yeah,
Yeah, and there's no, I mean, I find one of the biggest barriers to people accessing and utilizing and practicing Reiki is their own motivation. Like here's all the tools, here's everything. And if they're not properly motivated or, then they don't do it. And
that's
to
right.
me, that's a bigger factor than how many hours did you sit in my class? And
That's
I do
right.
everything. One of my biggest intentions before a class is that it be engaging and community building and motivating and empowering for everyone who's sitting there so that they feel transformed and empowered and have all this accessible to them when they leave. That's one of my biggest focuses. But sometimes people walk out the door and they go home, they put it on a shelf, and that's that. And
Yeah.
then it didn't matter how long of a class they took. That's not happening.
Well, right. And then shift to the woman that you mentioned who did the pre-recorded class and she did that. And now look at her. I mean,
Look at
she
her
just
go.
she does
Yep.
amazing Reiki. So
Yep.
we also cannot judge a practitioner based on the kind of training that they've had.
Right. Right. And
So
and all the more reason for these summits and your podcast and all these opportunities for us to build community and compare notes and share ideas and share practices and for people to try things and learn new things and expand their minds and expand their access to Reiki and expand their practice and deepen their practice. And so all of that can continue well after the classes for people who are engaged and want that. It's so wonderful that all of this is available.
it is wonderful. And to bring all the different voices together, I just think that it is a wonderful thing. That very well said. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, I'm so enjoying this conversation. I want to know what might be some unexpected benefits you've discovered from teaching Reiki online versus in person.
Early on, I was pretty worried about teaching online, if I'm honest. I was like, how is this going to be? Oh, but luckily I gave it a shot, and it believe me, I'm a lot better today than I was when I first started, but something really interesting happened. And this woman, she was in an early class that I did, and we did the placement or the attunement, but in my style we call it a placement because it's a little bit different in the
The
method.
whole the Holy Fire
Yes.
placements. Yeah.
Yeah. And so during that time, I invite the students, they can turn their camera off and then they can mute themselves. I never knew how powerful that was because when I teach online, I request at the beginning of class that everybody keep their cameras on for the most part. If you have to sneeze or take a big bite of something, you can turn it off. But for the most part, our cameras are on. And most of the time they're muted just because we're recording the class. And then so that makes the recording a little bit better with fewer distracting noises. So anyway, we're doing the placement, cameras are off, people are muted. And then when we come back, I ask, would anybody like to share about that? And one of the women said that she was so glad that we were online. And that got my attention because here I was, worried. And she said during that experience, she said so much grief welled up inside her and that she let it out. And she said she
Mm.
was wailing and crying and loud. And she said she felt hugely healed after that.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah, she said, had we met in person, she would have bottled that up and not allowed herself to release that because she would have worried about interrupting people or making a scene or something like that. And it was in that moment that a light bulb went off for me. And I just thought, wow, there is something unique in these classes. There is a benefit here. And that's when I really started to shift into my embracing of the online classes and not feeling like, they were less than in any sort of way. So there are unique benefits to online as well.
Yeah, the privacy as a factor, you wouldn't really think of that, but I have seen people tear up during an initiation, and there they are in a group setting, and it can become, you know, what happens in Reiki class stays in Reiki class. People bond, people get close, people are open with each other. But that kind of experience, I can see where she would be really grateful to have her privacy for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So I'm curious, how do you talked a little bit about the practice that people pair up. How does that work?
Well, we use breakout rooms in Zoom. And so people who aren't familiar with that, the teacher can press a few buttons and we make these virtual rooms. And so when it's practice time, we can instruct the students all in the main room about what the practice is going to be like and what they need to do. And then we can click a button and the rooms open virtually. And what I tell the students is they'll click a button and they'll whisk away through the ether. Their screen will change. And then when their screen comes back on or, repopulates, they'll be separated with their partner or their small group. It depends on the practice that we're doing. But then they're in their own room and it's private in there. The other students and myself can't hear them or see them. And that lends a lot of, I think, connection with them. So when they practice, they can talk to each other. It's hugely beneficial in that way. So we use breakout rooms. And then sometimes we use the breakout rooms in a different way, where if we're going to do a main room practice, where I might lead a practice and take them through the steps, because for some of the practices, especially in Reiki 1 and 2, I want them to just concentrate on the energy. What what comes up for them. I want them to make observations and things and not have to worry about, okay, what's step one? What do I have to do next? So I take care of that in the main room. But what we'll do is we'll use breakout rooms. They'll go in there, they'll meet their partner or their partners for the exercise. They'll decide the order, maybe. So who's going to receive first and second and third, or so forth, whatever the practice is really about. But they meet each other. They talk for a few minutes. They decide anything that needs to get decided like that. And then they come back in the main room, and then I will lead the whole group together. And so everybody's
Okay.
in the main room, but they all know, who they're practicing with, and they can just relax, as I said, and just follow the instructions that I'm giving to the whole group. But there are a lot of different things that we can practice with on Zoom that way. And everything, of course, works over distance. We already know that from, our Reiki practice. And so it really does work beautifully.
So even the level one, you do paired exercise distantly?
So in the level one, uh, I'm trying to think about my class. In the level one, no, we don't really in that one. But the next day before they have their, before we get really going on the day, they'll pair up and they'll do an energy exercise together. And so they actually stay in that room together for 20 minutes and they take turns. And so
Okay.
that's a neat thing that we can do as well, to kick off the day. So day one, we practice Kenyoku and we all get up and we all do it together. So it's a shared experience, even though we're online. But
Mm-hmm.
it gives us something to sort of have in common that morning. And then in day two, for the Reiki 2 class, we do the other exercise about clearing energy. And then that's the first time they get in their room for practice. And then in the master class, we do that even more, all the way to offering sessions, full sessions to each other. And actually um, in my Reiki 2 class, we do that as well, just a little bit differently. But I do lead that in the main room for them.
Okay. Yeah, because I'm remembering now as you're talking that you do level one and level two together over a couple days. So they
Yes.
are doing Reiki on a partner distantly before that first Reiki one and two class is over.
Oh,
Okay.
yes. Oh, yes,
Okay.
yes. Hmm. Yeah.
So yeah, so I teach Reiki one over 2 days and then Reiki two separately. So distant Reiki. So in level one, I just have in my instructions, have a partner handy for day two, and they do
Nice.
Reiki on their son or their husband or a neighbor or whoever. So they have a hands-on partner
Uh-huh.
before they learn the distant Reiki. Yeah, I was wondering how you do that, but yeah,
Oh, yeah.
remembering that you do those classes together, that works out better. Yeah,
Oh, yeah. Well, and then that way, if we do it this way, then the all the students are receiving as well. You
right.
know, people will come to class and they've never had a Reiki session before.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
True.
this lets them feel what it's like to give and feel what it's like to receive. And then they get to talk about it
Yeah,
with their partners, which is amazing because out in the real world, you may not have that
that's right.
opportunity.
That's right. Yeah. Yep. All great points. So is there anything else before we wrap up about how people can effectively teach online? Any other hints?
Well, what I would say is I think that quality teaching is really quality teaching. So even in person classes, I would use outlines. I would use discussion, practice, demonstration, all of those things. And so whether it's in person or online, stick with that. But, so yeah, the framework of good education is the same regardless. But you might have to adapt a little bit. But what that tells us is you need to learn the technology, right? So if you're going to teach online, you need to know how Zoom works. You need to know how those breakout rooms work. But what I tell people is who want to teach online and maybe they don't know how Zoom works or whatever, set up a test meeting. And so, have your family members or friends all come on Zoom and they're just going to enter the meeting and you're going to play with the controls and you're going to make breakout rooms and you're going to say, okay, use the chat thing. And what is that? And so you go through it that way and you just practice on your own time. And then you'll feel much more comfortable when class time rolls around. It's not new to you. So
Right.
just be more comfortable with the technology. I think that's really, I think that's really the only difference,
Yeah.
for in the teaching online and in person.
And most anyone that's going to sign up for these classes has spent time on Zoom by now. And so people have the hang of the mute button and the chat features that they use as an attendee. It's a little bit different if you're teaching for the first time because you have to orchestrate everything, as you said, practice because you got to learn where the buttons are, et cetera. But people coming to your class are mostly going to, it'll go pretty smoothly. Early in the pandemic, it was rough. We were all trying to figure out how Zoom works and it was a little bit rough, but
I
most
know.
everybody has got a handle on it by
Yeah,
now.
every now and again, though, I will say, every now and again, somebody comes to class, and I had a person a couple months ago, never been on Zoom before,
Oh gosh.
and we were all shocked. But the other thing I'll say is, a lot of people are familiar with Zoom, but they haven't had any experience with breakout rooms, and so that's pretty common. I'll have a couple people maybe in each class, and I'll ask anybody not familiar with breakout rooms, and I have a couple, but they're easy. It's
Yeah.
easy. And once you
Yeah.
get the hang of it, like you said, it's fine. And, it's a shared experience. And so if, something technically is kind of weird or, there's a little snafu, we're all in there, riding the wave.
And
So it's
people pitch
totally fun.
in. Other
Yeah.
students are like, it's down on the left.
Yeah.
Push the
That's
red
right.
button down on the left. It's a group effort. I
Yeah.
love that somebody, after all this time, has not been on Zoom and is motivated to be on Zoom to take a Reiki class. That makes me happy. This is the
Yes.
thing that's gonna push them over the edge to try something really new is I want to take that Reiki class, even though this whole Zoom thing is very foreign to me. That's lovely.
Yeah. Yeah. It was.
Um, so how do you create a sense of community and connection when people are online? We talked about a couple things, but is there anything special that you do?
Yeah. So, we early on in the class, we do introductions. And that's got I've got to say, I think that's one of my favorite parts of class because I get to learn about the different people. And, as a teacher, you need to manage that, right? Time management is huge if you're a
Yes.
teacher, again, in person or online, equally as important. But I frame it very well, and we go through, and each student tells a little bit about themselves in a couple of minutes, and that's lovely because as students are listening to the others, they're go, oh, me too, or oh, that's interesting. And they'll end up chatting with each other sometimes during the breaks and things like that. And it's really neat. It is really neat. We find out where each other lives. That's also neat because people are like, oh, I've always wanted to be there. I've always wanted to travel there. Or, I have people who come from all over the world. I had somebody recently from Taiwan. And how fascinating is that? And so we were coming back from a break and, I was asking him some questions and so we were getting into that together. And so taking a little bit of time to get to know the students a little bit more and just, I don't know, I would guess being curious about each other. And I think everybody who comes to the classes, there is that. There is a curiosity and I think they naturally want to connect with each other.
Yeah.
Practically speaking, what I would say is, we do share during class. They have opportunity. It's just not me talking the whole time. I mean,
Right.
so we give them opportunity to, again, in the breakout rooms, they can connect with each other, kind of have their own conversation about what we're doing, and I'm sure they ask other things of each other as well. Um, but they're sharing opportunities for them, and for me. And we talked also about it's that immersive experience. And so I think that helps build those connections. Um, I think also what I would say is in my classes, I take a class photo and
Yes.
I give that to them afterwards. So I think that's helpful to so that they can remember who was who and give them their contact information, just their email address, name, and general location. So, and I
Yes.
encourage them stay connected, trade Reiki sessions afterwards, things like that. And then of course, I invite them to email me after class if they have any questions. So they just don't feel like Zoom ends and they're adrift out there from
Right.
my perspective either, but each other so they can choose if they want to choose to connect, they can. And the online community that I have opened, it's been just about a year now. And I have to tell you, that's about my favorite place to be, is spending time in there with those amazing people in that community. And we do Reiki shares and swaps and group mentoring and things like that. But I have to tell you, it's been surprisingly um, moving for me because you mentioned somebody coming to your class who lived in a place of no, very small place, very small town, no teacher, no nothing. There are a lot of people like that. out in
Yeah.
the world where they have nobody around them that does Reiki, or maybe they just feel alone. Maybe they live alone. They don't have a community. And so, while some people might say, well, online, it's online. Well, you know what? It's online. You
Yeah.
know, that's a good thing.
That's
And
exactly right. Yeah.
I had a woman join the community right when I opened it, and she said, Andrea, this is like an answer to my prayer. She said, I was just the other day in my house saying, please, I need people like myself. And then I announced the community. And I have to tell you, it's amazing. And so um, there are opportunities. So if you don't have people in your community, if you don't, I mean, there are people who have family members that don't support them in their Reiki
Right.
practice. And
Right.
so, this is just another way to offer like-minded community connections. And I just think we need that right now. And it's
I love it.
something we can't do that in person, you know?
We can't do it for everyone in person. And
Right.
more people, as the energy is shifting universally, people are feeling called to this. And they're getting an inkling, they're getting guidance, they're not sure what it is, they see it, they want it. Sometimes online is the only choice, and they're so grateful for it. And so, you're offering community after your class, you're offering, here's the small community of the class, here's the contact information and the photo of people, and then here's your online mainstream Reiki community that you're offering. Here's a bigger group of people to come and connect with, and you're introducing them and ushering them into the greater global Reiki community, which is getting more and more voices and more intention. Um, every day, and growing exponentially, which is fantastic. And that is what they want. That's what they're feeling called to, and they're not quite sure it is.
Yeah.
So it's so beautiful to give people access to this via these remote classes, which, just to circle back to the beginning of our conversation, you and I were both skeptical of in the beginning, and we both are finding so rewarding, both for ourselves and for our students that come. So,
Yeah.
yay, yay.
Yeah. Well, we find a way, right? We find a way. There's a need, and we find a way to meet the need. And I think in with astounding success, we found a way to do it. And I'm sure it will continue to grow, and new ideas and new technologies and will be developed. But meeting people where they are, I ah
Yeah,
I
more
just
accessibility.
yeah,
Just more accessibility for more people. We are
that's right.
figuring it out.
Yeah,
That's right.
it is. It's exciting.
I want to thank you so much for sharing all of that. You have such wisdom, such great experience, such enthusiasm, and it's so wonderful for you to be so generous with it for everybody. You have an offer for folks offering $25 off of any of your classes through May 31st, 2025, May of next year. And there's a coupon code which will be listed beneath, but I'll just read it out. It's R raise 25, as in Reiki raise 25 is the code. Again, be listed below the screen as well. Do you want to say any more about that offer?
No, I just thought it might be nice to tell people who joined us here, that if they are moved to take a class, there's a little help anyway. But if you want to take it online, if you want to take it in person, just take it. Um, Follow your guidance. Follow your guidance. If you want to learn Reiki, or if you know Reiki already and you want to take more classes, because we always learn more every single class. And so, yeah, it's been a joy, Heather. It's been
Or
an
I
honor.
want to add, if you take classes and or maybe teach classes but don't teach them online, and you want to take an online class and see what that feels like for a student, that's an option too. See how that works. See how Andrea does that so successfully and beautifully.
Well, I hadn't even thought of that, but yeah, that's a wonderful idea too, Heather. But thanks so much for having me back. And I know it'll be a fantastic summit with an array of speakers. So
Thank you for joining us, and thank you for all your work in the world. We so appreciate you.